The moment I realized I was in trouble wasn't when he looked at me the way he did across the conference room, though that should have been warning enough. It wasn't when he fired the executive who touched my shoulder without my permission, or when he quietly moved my desk closer to his office without explaining why. It was the Tuesday morning he handed me my coffee, black, no sugar, exactly the way I take it, and said, without looking up from his documents, "You were up late again." The report didn't need to be that detailed, Amara. He'd noticed I was tired. He'd noticed what I drank. He'd noticed me, and I'd spent the last 4 years building an entire life around the promise that no one would ever get to do that again. I need you to stop, I thought, standing in his doorway, watching him scan pages with the focus of a man who never wasted a single second of his life. But what I said was, "Good morning, Director Lee," and he finally looked up. And he smiled just slightly, just at the corner of his mouth, like he already knew. That was the beginning of everything. My name is Amara Johnson. I am 31 years old, originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and I have been living in Seoul, South Korea for 3 years, 2 months, and approximately 14 days, not that I was counting. Okay, I was counting. I didn't come here chasing dreams or adventure or some romantic notion of reinvention. I came here running. Not from a bad person, from the absence of one. Marcus died on a Wednesday in October, exactly 2 weeks before our daughter's 2nd birthday. Pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed in February, gone in October, 8 months that swallowed everything we had in hospital bills, savings accounts, and futures we'd already named. Zoe was too young to understand where Daddy went. I was barely old enough to survive it. I paid the last bill the week after the funeral. I sold our apartment. I moved into my mother's house. I worked 2 jobs, finished the business administration degree I'd paused for love, and then one evening, staring at a job board at 2 in the morning while Zoe slept on the couch beside me, I saw a posting. Executive Assistant Seoul, South Korea. International candidates welcome. Relocation package included. I remember laughing. Then I remember applying. 6 weeks later, Zoe and I landed at Incheon International, with 2 suitcases and a plan held together entirely by stubbornness. I started at Seongjin Hotel Group as assistant to a senior executive named Park Hyun-soo. The work was fine, the hours were manageable. But Park Hyun-soo was the kind of man who tested boundaries the way children test electric fences repeatedly, and with full knowledge of what he was doing. He commented on my clothes. He dismissed my suggestions in front of junior staff. He let his hand rest too long on my shoulder during a presentation and looked at me like he was daring me to say something. I said something. I filed a formal report on a Thursday morning, and by Friday afternoon, I had been reassigned, which, in corporate language, is the professional way of saying we're punishing you for having boundaries. My new assignment was Executive Director Lee Min-Jae. I walked into that office expecting another Park Hyun-soo. I found something infinitely more dangerous. Lee Min-Jae was 34 years old, the youngest executive director in Seongjin Hotel Group's 40-year history, and the kind of man that a room reorganized itself around without anyone realizing it had happened. He wasn't the loudest person in a space. He didn't need to be. He had this quality, this absolute stillness at his center that made everything around him feel like it was slightly in motion by comparison. The first time I met him, he was standing at the floor-to-ceiling window of his corner office on the 22nd floor, hands clasped behind his back, looking out over the Han River like it was reporting to him. He heard me come in. I know he did because his head tilted almost imperceptibly, the way a person's does when they register a sound they were waiting for. But he let 3 full seconds pass before he turned around. "Miss Johnson," he said. Not a question, not a greeting. Exactly. Just my name, placed carefully in the air between us. "Director Lee," I said. "I was told to report to you." "You were." He looked at me for a moment, not in the way Park Hyun-soo had, which made me want to step backward, in a way that was assessing, precise, like he was cataloging information. "I've read your personnel file," he said. "Your work on the Busan expansion proposal was the clearest strategic summary in the quarterly review." I blinked. That report was submitted under Park Executive's name. "I know whose name was on it," he said, and turned back to the window. I also know who wrote it. He knew. He'd noticed. I told myself it didn't mean anything. I was wrong about that too. My first week under Director Lee's office was nothing like I expected. He was demanding the kind of precise that meant a document submitted at 3 p.m. would have annotations returned by 3:47 p.m. He expected answers before questions were fully formed. He moved through his schedule like it was a battle strategy, and he expected everyone around him to keep pace. But he was never cruel, never dismissive, never once made me feel like I was decoration. And that, honestly, was the most disorienting part. "Why didn't you push back on the Henderson contract clause?" he asked me on Wednesday of the first week, holding up a revised vendor agreement I'd processed. "The original clause protects the hotel group from liability in renovation delays," I said. "Modifying it shifts financial risk to our side." He was quiet. "I didn't push back because I didn't think it was my place to," I added. "I flagged it in the margin notes." He looked at the document, then at me. "Your margin notes," he said carefully, "were correct. Next time, push back. That's what you're here for." I didn't know what to do with that. At my previous job, at every job, being right and being heard were two entirely different things. No one had ever told me to use both at the same time. "Yes, Director," I said. He held my gaze for just a beat too long. "Min-Jae," he said. "In this office, when it's just us, the formality wastes time." I told myself that was simply an efficiency preference. I told myself a lot of things that first week. By the end of week 2, I understood his schedule better than my own. I knew he took his calls standing up and his meetings sitting down. I knew he disliked when presentations led with data before context. I knew he drank green tea in the morning and switched to water by afternoon, and never not once touched the coffee that the junior staff kept placing on his desk like an offering. He also started noticing things about me. Small things. Quiet things. The way he'd move a meeting 15 minutes later on the days Zoe's daycare pickup was close to my end time without ever acknowledging that he knew my schedule. The way he positioned my workstation so it caught the best afternoon light, after he'd glanced once at me, rubbing my eyes under the fluorescent glare. The way he started sending me into meetings as his representative when he was double booked, not a junior coordinator, not a department head, me. A reassigned executive assistant who'd been in his orbit for 2 weeks. "They'll question my presence," I told him, the first time. "Let them," he said simply. "You have the authority of this office behind you. That's enough." It wasn't nothing, what he did. But I couldn't figure out what it was. The physical proximity started in week 3. It happened naturally, the way most dangerous things do. A late briefing ran past 7. The office had emptied. I was at my desk compiling vendor contacts for the Beijing summit when I heard him say my name from his doorway. Amara. Not Miss Johnson. Not assistant. My name, in his voice, in the quiet of an empty floor. "The summit agenda," he said. "I need a second perspective." I walked into his office. He was at his desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the forearm, the first time I'd seen him anything less than perfectly assembled. And there was something about the smallness of it, the humanness, that made my chest do something I hadn't given it permission to do. I stood beside him to look at the document spread across the desk. I could feel the warmth of him from 6 inches away. "The opening session is overloaded," I said, focusing on the paper. "You have 4 presentations before the first break. International attendees will disengage by the 3rd. Move the Lee Group reception dinner to Thursday rather than Wednesday. Give them a social anchor after a lighter afternoon session." Silence. I glanced up. He was looking at me, not the agenda. And the expression on his face was something I didn't have the vocabulary for yet. Something careful and warm and just slightly undone. "That's a good instinct," he said quietly. "It's logistics," I said. "It's more than that." I looked back at the agenda. He looked at me for 3 more seconds. I know because I counted before he picked up his pen. I drove home that night with the windows down despite the cold, telling myself the warmth in my chest was just the heated car seat. Seoul in November is cold in the way that holds. Not bitter, just present. The kind of cold that finds the gaps in your coat and settles in. I had been working for Min-Jae for 6 weeks when he did the thing that I couldn't explain away anymore. We were at a hotel industry gala on the 47th floor of the Grand Intercity Seoul. Songjin was one of 3 groups presenting a joint sustainability initiative, and my job was to manage the evening's coordination schedules, presentations, seating, the invisible architecture of an event like this. I was moving quickly through a narrow corridor between banquet tables when my heel caught the edge of an elevated platform I hadn't seen in the low light. I went sideways, not a graceful stumble, a real, full sideways fall, and the arm that caught me came from nowhere. Strong, immediate, certain, I was upright in half a second, back against a solid chest, one arm locked across my waist with a grip that was secure without being rough. I knew who it was before I turned. I turned anyway. Min-Jae was looking down at me with an expression that had briefly abandoned its composure. Something quick had moved across his face, something like alarm, and now it was settling back into control. But not all the way. Not quite. His arm was still around my waist. We were very close. "If you wanted to touch me," he said, and his voice had dropped to something lower than his professional register, "you could have just asked." The audacity. The absolute. I felt heat rise to my face, and I was grateful for the low light. "I almost fell," I said. "I know," he said. "I caught you." He said it like it was simple. Like, of course he had. Like there had never been any other option. He released me slowly, not quickly. The way you'd let go of something inconsequential, but with a deliberateness that felt like punctuation. Then he straightened his cuff, looked past me toward the main hall, and said, "The Henderson VP is looking for you. Table 7, and walked away like nothing had happened. I stood in that corridor for 4 seconds doing absolutely nothing. Then I smoothed my dress, lifted my chin, and went to table 7. But my heart didn't come back down all evening. December arrived, and with it, the particular madness of year-end and luxury hospitality. I barely saw Zoe. That was the part that ate at me quietly, the guilt that came with building something for her while being absent from her. She was 5 years old, and she'd already learned to say "mommy works late" with the resigned wisdom of someone much older, and every time she said it, my chest compressed in a way that no amount of professional success could ease. I mentioned it once, in passing. I don't know why I mentioned it to him. We were working late again, and I'd gotten a photo from my mother's contact in Atlanta, who helped me video call Zoe sometimes when the time difference cooperated. Zoe was in footed pajamas, holding a stuffed giraffe I'd mailed her for her birthday, and she'd fallen asleep mid-call with her cheek on the phone screen. I made a sound. Just a small sound. The involuntary kind. "Your daughter?" Min-Jae asked. I hadn't realized he could see my screen from where he was standing. "Yes," I said, tilting the phone toward my chest on instinct. "How old?" I hesitated. 5. Something moved in his expression. "You moved here alone with a 5-year-old. She was with my family in Atlanta initially. She joined me when I'd stabilized." He was quiet for a moment. "What's her name?" "Zoe." He nodded slowly, like he was filing it carefully. Then he looked at me with that gaze that never knew when to stop. "Go home, Amara," he said quietly. "The rest of this can wait until morning. The Beijing." "Go home," he repeated. "That's not a request from your director. That's..." He paused, seemed to choose a word. "Advice. From someone who spent too many years deciding work mattered more than it does." I looked at him. He looked back. "Good night," I said. "Good night," he said. I drove home with my hands steady on the wheel and my mind very, very loud. The third time I knew something was real, not just tension, not just proximity, but something with weight and direction, was a Thursday afternoon in mid-December. I had been in a department meeting presenting the revised vendor structure for the Q1 renovation projects. There were 7 senior managers in the room. I was the only non-Korean national. I was the only one without a title above assistant. The senior manager of facilities, a man named Choi Bum-suk, who'd been with the company for 20 years and had opinions about everything, waited until I'd finished my presentation to say, "This is a support staff recommendation. Perhaps Director Lee's actual team should review before we proceed." The room went politely quiet. I had learned that polite quiet in Korean corporate settings often meant something had landed wrong for everyone, but no one would say so out loud. Before I could respond, the door opened. Min-Jae walked in. He hadn't been scheduled to attend. I knew his calendar better than he did. He was supposed to be in a call with the Singapore partners until 4. He came to stand at the head of the table. He looked at the presentation on the screen. He looked at me. Then, he looked at Choi Bum-suk with an expression of absolute pleasantness that contained something beneath it, like a closed door with a locked bolt. "I did review it," he said mildly. "I approved it this morning. Are there specific points you'd like to revisit, Manager Choi?" Choi Bum-suk said nothing. "Miss Johnson," Min-Jae said, addressing me while looking at the room, "please proceed." He stayed for the rest of the meeting. He didn't say another word. He didn't need to. After, in the hallway, I fell into step beside him and said, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he said. "It would have been fine. I would have handled it." "I know that too," he said. He glanced at me sideways. "I wanted to be there." He said it simply, like it required no defense. I didn't know how to answer that, so I didn't. The company winter event was held on the 22nd of December at the Seongjin flagship property, the Grand Seongjin Seoul, the crown jewel of the hotel group. 63 floors of glass and marble overlooking the city. I wore a dress I'd saved for a month to buy, deep emerald green, fitted, with sleeves that sat off the shoulder. I wore my hair up. Zoe had video called me before I left and said, "Mommy, you look like a princess." And I had held that with me all the way there. The evening was professional and glittering. I managed 3 coordination crises before 9 p.m. and consumed exactly 1 glass of champagne with the restraint of someone who knew she was working. At 9:30, the company's senior leadership and board members made their entrance to the main ballroom, and Min-Jae was among them in a black suit that fit like it had been assembled specifically for his frame, which, knowing him, it probably had. He found me across the room. Not the way people scan a room, the way a compass finds north. He came to me not in a straight line, but inevitably, having spoken to 4 people along the way, and when he reached where I was standing near the terrace doors, he said, "You look." He stopped. "Start it again." "The event is running well," he said. "You've done exceptional work tonight." I smiled. "Thank you, Director." He looked at me. "You know that's not what I was going to say." My smile didn't move, but something behind my ribs did. "I know," I said. He held my gaze for a long moment. Then he turned to stand beside me, facing the room, shoulders almost touching mine. "Dance with me," he said, quietly. Not a command and not quite a question, something in between, left open, like a door he was holding for me to walk through if I chose. "That would be noticed," I said. "Yes," he agreed. "I don't think that would be Amara." Something about the way he said my name. Just 2 syllables, but placed with such precision and such care, like something he was learning to carry without breaking. "Yes," I said. We danced. Properly, 1 hand in mine, his other at my waist. Appropriate distance, appropriate posture, public, visible. But his hand at my waist stayed exactly where it was for the full song, and he looked at me the way someone looks at something they've made a decision about. When the song ended, he said, very quietly, close enough that no one else would hear, "I had you reassigned to my office, Amara. You should know that. When Park's behavior was reported, you were meant to go to the Busan regional team. I requested that you come to me instead." I went very still. "Why?" I asked. "Because I'd read your report," he said. "The real one. And I thought," he stopped. "I thought I wanted to work with someone who wrote like that." "And now?" I asked. He looked at me. "Now I know I made the right decision for reasons I didn't anticipate." He stepped back, composed, professional, as if the last 4 minutes were a document he'd folded and placed in an inside pocket. "Thank you for the dance," he said. He went back to his table. I stood on the edge of the ballroom floor in my emerald dress and finally admitted to myself that I was completely in trouble. The first time I met his mother, I understood immediately that this was not going to be simple. Lee Chung-hee arrived at the Seongjin executive floor on a Monday morning in January without an appointment, which told me everything. She was the kind of woman who didn't need them. She was in her mid-60s, elegantly dressed, the kind of compose that had been maintained across decades until it was simply the shape of her face. She looked at me the way someone looks at a calculation that isn't adding up. "You're the new assistant," she said. "Executive assistant," I said. "Yes. Can I let Director Lee know you're—" "I know my son's schedule," she said. "I won't be long." She walked into his office without waiting. I called through. He picked up on the first ring. "Your mother is here," I said. A half-second pause. "Send her in," he said. "And Amara?" "Yes?" A beat. "Nothing. Thank you." The door closed. I went back to my desk. I worked. I didn't listen. 40 minutes later, Lee Chung-hee came out alone. She paused at my desk. I looked up. "You seem like an intelligent woman," she said. Her voice was pleasant in the way of something that has no intention of being warm. "I hope you're intelligent enough to understand your position here." "I'm an executive assistant," I said carefully. "I understand my position precisely." She looked at me for a moment. "Good," she said. She left. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Min-Jae, are you all right?" I stared at the message longer than I should have. "Me. Fine. Your 2 o'clock call to confirm." His response came immediately. "Min-Jae, that's not what I asked." The rumor began in February. I saw it first on a celebrity news app that one of the junior coordinators had pulled up in the break room, one of those sites that blurred photographs and used language specifically designed to imply without confirming. Lee Group Director's secret romance, a betrayal of heiress Han Ji-young. There was a photograph of Min-Jae and me from the winter gala, the dance. Taken from the terrace, someone with a phone, a long lens, a willingness to wait. We looked from that angle and distance, exactly like what we almost were. The junior coordinator saw me looking and immediately closed the app. "Miss Johnson, it's fine," I said. "I've seen it." I hadn't actually until that moment. But I went to my desk and I read every version of it. Han Ji-young was the daughter of the Han family, long-standing partners of the Seongjin Hotel Group. The articles described her as Min-Jae's childhood companion and presumed fiancé in the way that meant there had been expectation without formal declaration. He hadn't mentioned her, not once. I didn't know what to do with that silence, so I placed it carefully in the category of things I'd been trying not to think about and got back to work. He called me into his office at 3. "You've seen the articles," he said. "Yes. I need you to know." "Director," I said, "you don't owe me an explanation of your personal life." He looked at me with something that was almost frustration. "Amara, is there anything work-related you need from me this afternoon?" I asked. Professionally, evenly. A long pause. "No," he said. "That's all." I went back to my desk. I was very proud of how composed I was. I was also, quietly and entirely, falling apart. The envelope arrived on a Friday morning while Min-Jae was in Busan for a 2-day site inspection. It came via private courier. My name on the front, no return address. Inside was a letter on Seongjin Group family stationery and a cashier's check with so many zeros on it that I counted them twice. "Miss Johnson, we appreciate your dedication to Seongjin Hotel Group and to Director Lee's office. Enclosed, please find a generous severance package in recognition of your exemplary service. We trust you will understand that some professional relationships must conclude to preserve the interests of the family and the company. We wish you and your daughter well in your next chapter." It was signed by Lee Chung-hee. There was no meeting, no conversation, no severance agreement to sign, just a check and an expectation. I sat at my desk for a long time. Zoe's face came to me. The footed pajamas, the stuffed giraffe. "Mommy works late." I put the check back in the envelope. I put the envelope in my bag. I did not cash it. I also did not tell him. The second article came out the following week, while Min-Jae was back in the office and the air between us had gone careful and quiet in the way of two people navigating something they hadn't agreed to name. This one was worse. Insider source confirms. Director Lee's foreign assistant accepts private settlement. She knew what she was getting into. Someone had told them I accepted the check. Someone had told them that. I read it in the lobby bathroom on my lunch break, standing over the sink with my phone in both hands. And I felt something cold move through me, the particular chill of knowing a door has been closed from the outside. They had made the choice for me. They had told the story before I could. And whether I stayed or went now, the narrative existed. The woman who took the money. The woman who knew. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. I thought about Marcus, about the hospital, about selling the apartment, about landing at Incheon with 2 suitcases and a child, and not a single person in this country who knew my name. I thought about everything I had built here. And then I thought about Min-Jae's face on the dance floor, and the way he'd said I made the right decision, for reasons I didn't anticipate. And I thought, I can't do this again. I cannot love something this uncertain again. I don't have enough left. I gave 4 weeks' notice on a Wednesday morning. I submitted it through the formal HR channel because I couldn't deliver it to him in person. I knew if I stood in that office and he looked at me the way he sometimes looked at me, I would fall apart. And I had Zoe to think about, and I had already made my decision. He called my extension within 12 minutes. "Come in," he said. Not please. Just those 2 words, tight and stripped of everything around them. I went in. He was standing. Not at the window this time, in the center of the room, like he'd started moving toward the door and stopped himself. He held up his phone. The HR notification was on the screen. "Explain this," he said. "I've submitted formal notice. I know what it is," he said. "I'm asking why." "Director." "Min-Jae," he said sharply. "You call me Min-Jae. You have for months. Don't." He stopped, pressed his mouth together. "Don't go formal on me now." I looked at him. "I think it's time for me to move on," I said. "My daughter, I've been considering returning to the States. There are opportunities." "Stop." I stopped. "Tell me the truth," he said. "Quiet now. Controlled, but barely." "Was it the articles?" Min-Jae. "Was it my mother?" The silence that followed was its own answer. Something moved across his face, a particular kind of pain. The kind that comes not from surprise, but from confirmation. "What did she do?" he said. "Nothing that wasn't I started." "Amara. What did she do?" I looked at him for a long moment. At the man who had caught me when I fell and made space for me in every room, and told me to push back and looked at me like I was a decision he'd already made. "She sent a check," I said. "And someone told the press I'd taken it." The stillness that came over him then was unlike any I'd seen. Not the calm stillness of control, the stillness of something going very quiet right before it moves. "You didn't take it," he said. Not a question. "No," I said. "And you didn't tell me." "It wasn't—" I took a breath. "It wasn't about the check, Min-Jae. The check was just, it clarified something. I'm not someone who can afford to be a complication in your life. I have a daughter. I don't have the luxury of whatever this is. I can't let it become something and then lose it. I can't." My voice had started to fracture. I stopped it. "I can't survive another loss like that," I said quietly. "So I'd rather leave before I have to." He looked at me for a long time. "That's the most unfair thing you've ever said to me," he said. "You're leaving to protect yourself from something I haven't done. Your family is not my decision," he said. "I am my decision. And I have been deciding every day. Every week I have been deciding, and you know it, and you're leaving anyway. Min-Jae." "Don't," he said, and his voice, for the first time since I'd known him, was unsteady. "Don't tell me it's better this way." I couldn't answer him, because I didn't know if it was true. I walked out of his office with my resignation standing. I gave Zoe the news that weekend. She was 5, which meant her concerns were primarily logistical. Would we bring the stuffed giraffe? Would they have good cartoons in America? Could she have a window seat on the plane? I held her after she fell asleep, and I was very, very still. I thought about a dance on a December evening. I thought about I made the right decision for reasons I didn't anticipate. I thought, so did I. So did I. The day before my last day, I was called into Lee Chung-hee's office. Not Min-Jae's. His mother's a formal meeting room on the board floor. 2 assistants present. A table between us like a negotiation. I'm told you're leaving, she said. Yes. Good, she said. And then, without a pause, there is no engagement with Ji Young. There never was a formal arrangement. I want you to understand, the press situation was managed to create clarity. Managed. You lied, I said. She didn't flinch. I protected my son's future. From what? I asked. My voice was level. I was very proud of it. From someone who works for a living? From someone who came to this country with nothing and built something? From what, exactly? Did he need protection? She looked at me. For the first time, something in her composure shifted, not cracked, but shifted, like light changing the angle on a surface. He's not the same since you came, she said, quietly, almost to herself. He smiles differently. I didn't answer. That frightened me, she said. I looked at her, this woman who had built walls around her son out of something that was probably love, shaped wrong. I'm still leaving, I said. I know, she said. I walked out. We flew out on a Saturday. Zoe wore her giraffe backpack and fell asleep on my shoulder an hour into the flight, and I watched Seoul disappear beneath the clouds and told myself I had done the right thing for both of us, and mostly I believed it. We moved into a sublet in Atlanta, near my mother, and I found work quickly. My Seongjin resume carried enough weight to open doors, and within 3 weeks I had 2 interviews lined up at hospitality groups. I was fine. I was doing fine. Fine is a word I had become very good at inhabiting. It was on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after we'd left Seoul, that Zoe looked up from her coloring book and said, "Mommy, why do you look sad when you think I'm not watching?" 5 years old. The wisdom of 5-year-olds is genuinely unfair. I'm not sad, baby, I said. She looked at me with big, serious eyes. You make the face, she said. Like when you miss something. I picked up a crayon and handed it to her. Pick a color, I said. She considered this deeply, then picked green. Like your dress, she said. The pretty one. I went very still. She hadn't seen me in the dress. She'd seen me on a video call before I left for the gala, months ago, for 30 seconds. She'd remembered the color. I put down my crayon. I sat with that for a very long time. The knock at the door came on a Thursday evening, 12 days later. I was not expecting anyone. My mother was across town. I had groceries scheduled for delivery the next morning. I opened the door. Min-Jae was standing on my front step in Atlanta, Georgia, in a coat that was too light for February, holding nothing, looking at me like he had rehearsed this moment approximately 1,000 times and abandoned every version of it. I stared at him. How? Your emergency contact form, he said. You listed your mother's address. I found the street from there. I searched for the word. That's a lot of effort. Yes, he said simply. We stood there, cold air between us, the sound of the neighborhood, the porch light catching the exhaustion on his face. You look tired, I said. I've been on a plane for 14 hours. Min-Jae. Let me say this, he said. Please. And then you can tell me to go and I will go. But I need to say it first. I stepped back. He came in. He stood in my small Atlanta living room in his expensive coat, in this rented space with Zoe's drawings on the refrigerator and her stuffed giraffe on the couch, and he looked around once, and his expression did something I'd never seen it do. It went soft. I confronted my mother, he said, about the check, about the press, about all of it. He turned to face me. She admitted it. She told me she fabricated the narrative about Ji Young. There was never an engagement, never an expectation. It was created to pressure you. I know, I said quietly. She told me, the day before I left. Something moved across his face. She told you, yes, and you still left. I looked at him. Min-Jae, your mother telling me there's no fiancé doesn't change the rest of it. Your family, the company, I told you. I can't be a complication. I can't let Zoe watch me. I'm not asking you to be a complication, he said. I'm asking you to be a choice. My choice. Clearly, explicitly, publicly mine. The room went very quiet. What does that mean? I said carefully. It means, he said, that I resigned from the family board advisory 3 days ago. I'm keeping the director position. That's mine. I earned it. But the family veto on my personal life is done. It's finished. He paused. It means that I told my mother, directly, that there is a woman I have been falling in love with for 8 months, and that if she cannot accept her and her daughter, then she will see less of me. I couldn't speak. It means, he said, softer now, that I flew 14 hours to stand on your porch, because I was not willing to let the ending be you leaving. That's not the ending I choose. You don't. My voice was unsteady. I stopped. Started again. You don't know us, Zoe and me, what that actually means, day to day. I know Zoe likes giraffes, he said. I know she called you a princess in a green dress. I know she has your eyes and your stubbornness, and that you've carried her and everything else for years on your own, and I am not, his voice tightened. I am not asking you to let me replace anyone. I'm asking you to let me be something new, something additional, for both of you. I looked at him, this man who had found me across every room, who had caught me when I fell and kept me close and told me to push back, who had flown across the world and was standing in my living room in February cold with nothing in his hands except the truth. I'm scared, I said. I know, he said. I don't recover easily. I know that too. She's the most important thing in my life. Before anything. Before anyone. She should be, he said without hesitation. I would think less of you if she weren't. Something in me, something that had been holding itself very tight for a very long time, began, slowly, carefully, to release. Mommy? We both turned. Zoe was in the hallway doorway in her pajamas, giraffe tucked under one arm, looking at Min-Jae with the calm assessment of a 5-year-old who has decided something is interesting. Baby, I said, moving to her. You're supposed to be asleep. I heard talking, she said. She looked at Min-Jae. Who are you? He crouched down to her level, all 6 feet of him, folding himself to her eye line, and said, with the full seriousness he'd have given a board member, My name is Min-Jae. I work with your mother. Zoe considered him. You came a long way, she said. I did, he agreed. Why? He glanced up at me briefly, then back at her. Because your mom is very important, he said, and I wanted her to know. Zoe looked at him for a long moment with those serious eyes. Then she held out the giraffe. You can hold Gerald if you want, she said. He helps when things feel scary. Something happened to his face, then a softening so complete and so genuine that I had to look away because it moved through me like something I hadn't felt in years. He accepted the giraffe with both hands. Thank you, Zoe, he said. I put her back to bed. He waited in the living room, Gerald still in his hands, looking at her drawings on the refrigerator. I came back and stood in the doorway. I didn't take the money, I said. I know. I never would have. I know that too. I crossed the room and stopped in front of him. He stood still, the way he always did, that stillness at his center. If I come back, I said quietly, it's not just me. It's both of us. All the complications and the school schedules and the time differences and the learning curve and… Amara, he said. What? I know, he said gently. That's why I'm here. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I took Gerald the giraffe back because Zoe would need him in the morning, and then I closed the distance between us. He stayed for a week. He met my mother, who looked him up and down and said, You flew 14 hours? Which, from her, was essentially a blessing. He sat on the floor with Zoe and learned how to color inside the lines and lost at Go Fish 3 times in a row without complaint. He made coffee in my kitchen in the mornings and handed me mine black, no sugar, with the same slight smile he'd always had, the one that went just a little too long. On the last morning before he flew back to Seoul, we sat on the porch in the February cold with our coffee, and he said, Come back when you're ready, not before, but I want you to know the position is yours. The office is yours. And whatever comes after that, he looked at me, that conversation is also ours to have. You're very patient for someone who flew across the world in 4 days, I said. Calibrated, he said. There's a difference. I laughed. He looked at me when I laughed the way he always had, like he was collecting it. I'll come back, I said. I know, he said. He left. I stood on the porch after his car disappeared. and I thought about all the things I had lost: Marcus, the apartment, the version of the future I'd planned, and all the things I had built from the wreckage. A career, a language, a life, a daughter who offered her stuffed giraffe to strangers because she'd learned that love was something you gave freely, the way it had always been given to her. I had moved to Seoul, running from grief. I had built something there. I had left, and somehow, across 14 hours of airspace, and 3 years of starting over, and one December dance in an emerald dress, I had been found. Not rescued, not saved, found, by a man who had noticed my coffee order and my tired eyes and my margin notes, who had crouched down to my daughter's eye level and accepted a stuffed giraffe with both hands, who had chosen me clearly, explicitly, publicly, and flown across the world to say so. I went inside. I booked 2 tickets to Seoul, window seats, both of them, one for me, one for Zoe. I thought I had lost everything worth holding. But I had just been learning what was worth going back for.